She's agreed to it.
She
spent last week in the hospital.
She did. She's all right now.
Okay. This is Damian Macy, and I'm representing the Friends of the Marshall Public Library. It is July the 8th, 2015, and I'm visiting with Martha Ann Markle here at the Marshall Library. And her maiden name happened to be Bush, a very dominant name here in the community and the education. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Martha Ann.
Well, Damien, this has been such an honor to be asked to do this, because people have come up to me and said, has Damien asked you to do the history on different things in your life? And I said, well, yes, but you know what? It seemed like we were so busy, we weren't for sure we were ever going to get it done. But you know how Damien is. When he puts his mind to it, it's going to get done. So I followed right along, and when he called, we made it the next day, and that's the 8th, just exactly like he said. Well, you know, I think it's wonderful to do this because, of course, at 75 years old, which I am, I'm not going to last forever. And all the things that have happened to me in my lifetime because of different opportunities I've had, you know, it's wonderful for people to be interested enough. If they want to know a little bit more about me, they can learn it from Damien and all of the things that he has at the library. So, you know, probably the very first thing that I put down on my list of things was that Mr. Arney was such a big factor in my life.
Von Arney.
Von Arney, yes. He was so wonderful. And, you know, kids had come up to me and say, you get to do so many things because you know everybody. Well, it doesn't matter who you know, it's what you produce. So Mr. Arney was really great to me as far as he was sitting at the piano playing, and he stopped, and he had the whole chorus in there at the time. And he said, Martha Ann, we need some dancing girls. And I said, okay, Mr. Arney, I'm not for sure exactly what you want. And he said, we'll talk after this class. I said, okay. And he said, really what I want is, with the band, I want to increase the number that way. And, you know, a lot of girls, all they can do is cheerlead, and there's not another activity they can do. And this way we'll open up a gate for another type of organization. I said, well, I think there are enough dancers in Marshall with Terre Haute, with the teachers over there, that will be okay. So we started the Marshallettes, and of course, you know, he never did criticize what I did as far as costuming or anything like that, but I had people like Rosella Jones, which was Roberta's mother, who made the first costume for the Sparkettes, which of course that jumps from 1958, and then you know, we had a lot of activities to do, so we needed more than one costume, so Rosella was wonderful about putting together another costume. But anyway, it was a lot of fun to do, and Marshallettes are still alive. They still perform, and it was rather ironic that they didn't have a director, and Melissa, my daughter, and I decided that we would put our application in to see if they would like to have it done again by somebody, and the Board of Education decided it would be fine. So it was like, you never can come home. I told Mr. Manuel that when he called me up to say that they had accepted our applications, and I said, well, that's wonderful, we'll do our very best job. And I gotta tell you, it wasn't all easy. The parents are wonderful to work with, even when they have an idea that they think is a much better one than you have. You need to listen and then go on from there. And it worked out just fine. And Marshallettes are still going, and I'm not for sure who's directing now, but the girls have had a good time doing it. It's just been a lot of fun, and they come back and talk about it and things that they did. So that was one of the very first things I thought about.
Did you select the name Marshallettes, or did some of the girls, or how did that come about?
Well, you know, I'd imagine that probably Mr. Arnie threw out 2 or 3 different names, and because, you know, he definitely was a leader, and we all respected and loved him so that I would guess that he probably did it. So I will give him all the credit, and Mr. Arnie, if you didn't do it, just take the credit and smile. So, but I think that's probably the way it was. But then what was so ironic was that then the younger girls are called the Cub Cadets. And those girls are 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. Now it's a little harder to work with them because, you know, big families have 100 different ways they go. Piano lessons, dancing lessons, knitting lessons, you name it. They need to do it all. So, but it went over all right too. And Cub Cadets, I'm not for sure. That'd be those girls are younger and they work very hard too. It isn't an easy activity. You have to be a little bit of a dancer or you're just not going to be able to keep up. So that worked out fine too. But then, of course, the other woman, another person at the top of my list would be Ernestine Myers. And Ernestine was my dancing teacher for all of my life. And Miss Ernestine was a professional herself, had danced on Broadway, and had been an absolute beautiful, gorgeous person, and what a dancer she was. And she had her mother lived with her. She had 2 husbands and lost them through death. And if you were asked to go downstairs in the big house on 5th Street in Terre Haute, you knew you had made it that day because Miss Ernestine's mother was going to critique you. And so that was always an honor when she'd bring her mother upstairs, or we would go downstairs to see her. And she was a tiny fairy type lady with beautiful clothes and beautiful hair, but very petite, very, very small individual. But Miss Ernestine always looked so professional. But someone like Chrissy Bennett, Chrissy took from me, and so did Mary Kay Mitchell, and they were my first students in Marshall when I started my studio. And their mothers had come with them to ask if I would start a studio, and ask them if Chrissy and Mary Kay could be in the studio. And I was talking to Chrissy when she comes back. She always is very nice to me and talks to me, and she said, "Do you remember you paid me? You paid me to take the money." And I said, "Chrissy, I don't remember that, but I know that you did a good job or you wouldn't be doing it." And she said, "You know, I really contribute a lot of my success to the things you taught me." And Mary Kay then went to Purdue. Now, Chrissy went to the University of Illinois, and Mary Kay went to Purdue, and Mary Kay came to the house one day and she said, "Martha Ann, I want to be in the Miss Purdue contest for the Miss America." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "We need to fix up a number for me." And I said, "Okay, we'll work on a number." And I Enjoy Being a Girl was a number that we picked. And she got second runner-up. We didn't win it, but she was very satisfied, and so were her mom and dad, that she had done a good job and represented the school well, and she enjoyed doing the dance and all that. But Miss Ernestine watched the numbers, you know, but you know, it's fun to talk to both of them. And of course, we've lost Mary Kay now, but Chrissy, we'll never forget her. That was her very best friend. And they did so many wonderful things together. So really, Vaughn Arnie and Ernestine Myers, and there's been so many different people in my life that have given me such good backing and good ideas and straightened me out when I needed it. Just not my father. But my mother would set him straight if he got too tough on me. So I was always pleased when my mother would do that, because sometimes Daddy could be very, very tough.
Ernestine Myers, I remember meeting her. Her brother lived in Martinsville. And I used to mow yards, and he owned a drugstore. And he was visiting her, I think, one night. He was in a fog or something, and was killed in an auto accident driving home.
Really? Well, of course, the beautiful house that they have out toward Martinsville is Ann, I believe,
Ann Cooper lives there.
lives in it, and she loved that house very much. I'm so sorry. I did not know that story about her brother. I don't think I ever met her brother.
You'll probably not.
But I did meet Mickey Buzash, and Mickey is a French major and was a professor at school. And his sister taught for Miss Ernestine, but they also danced for Miss Ernestine together and separately. And Flora Ann was her name, and she was a marvelous tap dancer. And it was fun to watch them dance. But anyway, Miss Ernestine really was wonderful about supporting me as far as my activities in my studio. Like if I gave a review, she would send her better dancers over because I wouldn't have that kind of dancers yet, when you have a brand new studio. But because of doing the Miss Purdue contest, I've been asked to do a lot of different pageants, and it's fun to do those, whether they be fair contests. And I'll never forget when Daddy said, well, we need a beauty contest now. I said, okay, and there were over 30 young ladies the very first contest that we had, and I have a picture of them all lined up. I'd have to really look to see where that picture is. But anyway, it was fun to see all the girls, and Carol Smitley or Terry Turner, both were at the top of the list of being people that, I don't know which one won it or if either one of them did. But I wouldn't want to get anybody upset because I forgot somebody. But anyway, they both were very attractive women and both very talented. And the other girls were very happy for them. Now, this was not the fair contest they have now. This was just one that we put on. But then eventually it led to what they do now. And they have the judges, which we had judges to judge too. And it worked out really well. And so I enjoyed judging pageants, and besides doing all the singing that I have done all my life, and of course my mother really had a beautiful voice, and I was very fortunate to have gotten some of her talent. And when Helen decided to start the auxiliary choir, I'll never forget, I was on the steps of the high school, and Emmy Fritcher came out on the steps, and she said, Martha Ann, we want you to be in the choir with us. I said, oh my goodness, what a nice compliment. I said, well, I'll probably be your youngest one. She said, that'll be good for us. We need young people. So Carol Kern, Sullivan, and myself were the youngest people in the choir, and of course that's when they were winning national championships. And that's another person that would go at the top of my list. Helen was a fabulous director. She knew exactly what she wanted. She knew the kind of music to pick, and that's how come we could win and go all over the country. And Marshall was so proud of us. And I know there's a plaque down at the Legion with everybody's name on it, and sometimes somebody has been forgotten, and then they have to take the plaque down and put that name up because they'll say, well, I sang in the choir. And so it had to be taken care of right, so Helen made sure it was. But she'd be another person that was absolutely a fabulous person to pattern your life after.
She was not only just a marvelous musician, but a marvelous person in her personality.
Oh my goodness, wasn't she though? And it was fun to sing in the church choir because she really, and then of course, after Helen had it for a while, then I think Priscilla had it for a while, and then now Paula Ross has it. So it's been done by people who know and love music, and I know this year I didn't get to sing in it because the dentist decided I needed new teeth. So I had to have all implants put in, and I got that taken care of. But I'll go back to it now, and I missed it. I missed it a lot, that's for sure. Daddy really did a lot of different things, and I'd imagine you've had a lot of people maybe talk about him. So I probably would be, you know, duplicating some of the things, but I just jotted down some of the things that I remember about Daddy when he was working on projects. Hulman Center was a big project of his. That what he did with Hulman Center, of course, is in Terre Haute and on Indiana State's campus. And if you've listened to the news lately, they're trying to get it built so it's a bigger facility and can have many other things housed besides just basketball games and big truck competitions and all that. They want to really make it a
You're talking about making a convention center. Which
right.
encompasses a lot of different things.
Right, they are, and really we do need that in Terre Haute, an area that we can have. Tilson can't hold that. Tilson only holds about 4,000, and that's not big enough for a big convention type situation. So, but Daddy worked very hard on getting the money. He had a way of telling people that it was a necessary thing, even though it was in Terre Haute, that Marshall people would be also enjoying different things that we would do over there. And he even worked out tuition as far as if you made a high grades, then you would get a break on your when you went to school there. And they've cut it a little bit down, but it's still something that Daddy would have been very proud of. But also, he had a lot to do with the American Legion. He really knew that the Legion needed an area to meet in, and it was always nice to see all the commanders up and all of the women that were leaders of the women's auxiliary up too. And of course, then the choir was always had pictures up. And he worked very hard on Burnside's nursing home and the fair. He felt the fair was very, very necessary for Marshall. And he really enjoyed doing all of those things. And there are others that I probably have forgotten. And I'll get to heaven, he'll say, "You forgot to tell him about this." And I'll say, "Well, Daddy, I'd imagine somebody else got it told. I can't remember everything." But I did try.
Was he instrumental in helping get the Burnside nursing home started or constructed?
And that first group of men.
I thought so.
Yes, he did. And I'm not for sure who else was on that group of men. That's what's so hard to remember.
I know.
But yes, he did. He knew. And of course, they lived in it. Then Johnny said, "It's going to be better if we split them up, and I'll take Daddy to Florida with me, and you keep Mother up at Burnside's, and you take care of her." And that's the way we did it. And then, they were taken care of so well. I think it was, I'm not for sure who the director was at that time. Jackie Williams, maybe. I'm not for sure who it was. But they really enjoyed living there, and it made Daddy sad to leave it, but it was better that Johnny be the sole one to take. Daddy did not like to take directions from, he didn't like to take directions from me. I think women were fine as long as the gymnasium was needed by men. They got first priority over it. So it was better that Johnny took care of that. But anyway, Johnny and I were expected to go over to Burnside's and give shows. For my Uncle Roy, who lived with us, we gave an organ at the very first when it was built in his name, so that there at least would be an organ there. And I know there had always been probably a piano there. I don't know who gave that, but that was wonderful, they did. And we gave shows, and then also when Charlotte and Rhett really worked hard to get the Autumn Fest off the ground and made it such a success, and with Jerry Forsythe's help, it was really fun to see the kind of shows that Autumn Fest would bring in, because we were getting better shows than Terre Haute was. And it was really fair to have it then. But anyway, at the Autumn Fest, we gave many types of shows and gave talent contests and all kinds of things. So they had provided another area for kids to participate. And Daddy really thought the fair, though, was something that needed to be really taken care of. The track should be taken care of. You know, Bob Mars, and I'm not for sure what Mr. Mars' first name was. I know Bob was the son, but maybe I don't remember that for sure. But anyway, when the horses were there, you know, they were very important. And still we have some horse racing, but Martinsville, I know, has quite a bit of horse racing.
Martha Ann, you mentioned two names that I think I know, but I want to add to them. You said Charlotte and Rhett. You were talking about Charlotte DeShiel and Rhett Smitley, I'm sure.
Right. They two, both of them chaired. Now they had other people like Pat Rhodes and Joe Smitley and different people, Pat McCammon, that would come and help, and they had their own activities that they would take care of. It was so well run that it was beautifully run, and people enjoyed coming with their chairs to see everything, you know, and enjoy such a great activity.
And still in continuous operation every year.
Right, it does. I do miss Charlotte and Rhett and the rest of them doing it, but you can't do it forever. You know, it's just like Melissa and I were talking, my daughter, about when I would retire. And she said, now, Mom, you don't want them to come and say to you, Mrs. Markle, don't you think it's time to retire? I said, no, I don't want that to happen. She says, well, then probably it's better that you retire and let someone else take it over. And if they need any suggestions, you'd be glad to give it to them. But it's best to leave it when you're on top.
It's a good way to look at it.
And right, and I have missed it. I have missed it a lot. I really enjoy ballroom dancing, and that's what I ended up teaching. They brought me back when Greta Traber was done, and Greta was a marvelous ballroom dancer, she and her husband. But, you know, when they left, then I'll never forget the phone call when John Osmond called me, Dr. Osmond, and he said, now, Martha Ann, I can't pay you much, but we want you to come back and teach ballroom dance. I said, oh, that'll be great. I'll love to do it. And it was very successful. I mean, people will say, well, how do you get the men to do it? I said, well, usually if you tell them that it can be as almost as important as golf as far as doing business. So if you know how to do more than just play golf, and you take someone to a dance and you're the best one on the floor, and you know now they have the dance contest over there, and it's, you know, and now Dancing with the Stars is such a big activity, you know, on television. And so you think you can dance, another big activity. So it's fun to see things really grow, and for sure they have. Talent shows and baton contests. Baton was really something that I really loved to do also. And so I taught a lot of baton people, and Margie Richardson and Roberta Jones were the absolutely fantastic baton twirlers. And I initiated a scholarship for the featured twirler to come and participate at school. They don't have a featured twirler now, but you know, it's in the South, baton twirling is still very, very prominent and important, but up north it's not as important. People are driving hundreds of miles to find the good teachers now. Okay. But in the South, you still can be a featured twirler.
Martha Ann, you mentioned two names, Margie Richardson, who I know, and who's the other one?
Roberta Jones Litherland. Roberta was Olin just passed, and Glenn just passed away just recently. Okay. And Glenn also took dancing lessons, if you can imagine that. His mother brought him out on the front porch with Roberta, and she said, and she was the one who made costumes for me. She said, I want these two people to be able to dance and walk across the floor without falling down. And I said, Rosella will
do
get that done. There won't be any, and you know, Glenn, to this day, before he died, he would always stop and talk to me and say, I can still walk across the floor. And I said, I'd imagine, Glenn, you can walk across the floor.
Oh, I like that.
He was fun to be with, and Roberta was an excellent teacher. And she was a principal up north at Elkhart, and her husband was the band director. And he was Dr. Litherland. And so it was fun how they met. They met I had sent her over to do the corps in Brazil. And that's where he was working with the band. And they met there, and they've been married now for years and years and years, thank goodness. And he is so talented and so much fun to be around. And every now and then they'll stop in and say hello. And that's such a nice compliment. I really appreciate that. Okay, let's see. Now, if you want to ask me one of those questions that you had, how I look.
Well, I would like for you to comment a little bit about your mother too. She was.
Oh.
You mentioned she loved music, and I do know that. She sang in the church choir, and I know. But she had quite a dynamic, I think, career in teaching also.
Mother is the type of individual that she sensed when students needed help the way she gave it. And the way she gave it was by listening to them and helping them to realize how important they are in the world. And I still have people, and there are people that are very successful, come up and say, I could contribute my success to your mother. And I said, well, you know, I contribute my success to my mother too. She was an individual who loved people. She wanted them to succeed. They knew that by the way that she treated them. And she was an excellent teacher and received many awards for her teaching. And she taught in Marshall some, but then it was better that she moved to Terre Haute. So she taught then at South High School, the big high school, where it graduates thousands of people instead of hundreds of people when they graduate. Because our daughter, Maddie Webster, well now Maddie Markle at the time when she was doing this, graduated with 2,000 people in her graduating class. But she said, I said, where do you think you're going to go to school, Maddie? And she said, well, Mom, I don't need to go to a big university. I've already been to a big school at South. I'm going to go to Indiana State just like Grandma did. Now that would be mother's mother and father and my mother and father. Jim and I, my husband and I, went to Indiana State, and so did Maddie, and my whole family has gone to Indiana State. We all realized that it was a university that was growing now, and look now how big it is now. Yes, and how many new buildings there are. And some of the old buildings I hate to see go, but that's the way it goes.
I'm so glad they're restoring the old library.
Yes.
And bringing it back. I'm not sure what all it's going to be used for, but that was such a beautiful building.
It really is.
It kind of languished there for a long time.
Right, and a lot of people still use the stacks and go in and study in the stacks. So, you know, it was a place that I'm glad they aren't tearing it down. They really aren't doing to take it away from us. You know, talking about the swimming pool, everyone says, well, they should put a cover on that swimming pool so it could be used all year. Well, that would cost a lot of money. But anyway, when we first got the swimming pool, we did water shows. And I know Darilee Harlow Smith, I swim with her out at men's pool, which is a heated pool, and her daughter and Pat Lindley. And all of us enjoy the pool so much. And she said, Martha Ann, didn't you do those water shows? I said, well, you helped do them. Nancy Sauer brought her better dancers over. Miss Ernestine brought her dancers over. And we did dancing on the side of the pools. And then the people that were really good swimmers could do synchronized swimming. But you had to be a very good swimmer to synchronized swim. But we had a few people like Dick Swain and some of the ones that were guards could do it and do it easily. And it was nice to be able to give Marshall another touch of something that they'd never seen before. And it was nice that Darrell Lee realized that, you know, that was a lot of fun and she remembered it. So I was flattered about that.
You were talking about your dad involved in different things. Was he one of the early people who helped get Formula Light established here also? For some reason that I
And would you believe my granddaughter, Maddie, is a senior at State now, and she needed a good job. She needed a full-time job. She is down at TRW working.
Okay.
And she is, the one thing that they have to do, they have to wear those Croc shoes to make sure that there's no
For static.
Right. And it's interesting to hear her talk because she really enjoys it. She enjoys the people that she's working on the line with. She gets up at a quarter till 4. She's working a 12-hour shift. That's what she's working. And she said, Grandma, you have got to keep those dogs quiet. I have 2 dogs that bark a lot. One's little, one's bigger. And anyway, she said, because they wake me up and I have to sleep to be able to do this. And I said, well, I'll make sure that they're more quiet. But yes, Daddy did. Now, I'm not for sure what he did, and I'm sure there are people that know exactly what all of them did.
I guess I remember hearing his name mentioned along with Benny Mars and some of the folks who were instrumental in helping get the business started as Formula Light.
Right, and look at now, it's probably one of the better jobs in town that you can get. Yeah. You know, it's she got three positions, TRW, a waitress in Terre Haute, and the last one was, I can't remember what the last one was that she got accepted in, and she picked the TRW one because it was full-time, and also it helped with insurance and everything like that. So she really was pleased that she had gotten, and she needed the money because school is not, you can have all the scholarships in the world and they still probably are not going to get you into school unless you have some extra money.
Martha Ann, you mentioned your mother's love of music, your love of music, and that has passed on, I believe, to your granddaughter too, hasn't it?
You know, Paula Ross is wonderful to work with, and Paula realized that Maddie plays a pretty good flute and a piccolo, and she would have her do different numbers with the choir, and Maddie really appreciated doing it, and she would do anything for Paula because Paula helped her. You know, voice teachers are almost as hard to find good ones now. Mr. Tafflinger was an excellent, Johnny, my brother, took from Mr. Tafflinger, and he did Stout-Hearted Men in the recital. And of course, Johnny was not really a singer. He was really an athlete. And, he was one of the first people to be an outstanding athlete out on the board out there at school. And he never brags about himself, but he's still working. And I keep saying, Johnny, when are you going to retire? He's only a year younger than I am. He's 74 years old. And he says, Daddy says, if you retire, sometimes you get a little lazy. I'm never going to get lazy. I said, well, that's good. And I didn't really talk enough about my mom. My mother was a good voice teacher. She also took from some very fine voice teachers. And she loved to sing and had a beautiful voice. And people in town would use her as far as at funerals or at different shows, and Helen also used her as soloist in the choir, and there were other soloists in the choir, not just Mother, and it was wonderful to hear her sing. And Don Ferris, the one that works for Marathon, is that Don, that lived down on 8th Street? Well, anyway, one of the Ferrises had a 33 1/3 of the choir, and he gave me the record, and it had Let My People Go and some of the songs that we had won with, and that was so thoughtful of him people in town, Marshall is really a wonderful town for taking care of things that, like the records, saving the record and then giving it on to, so I will give now it to Melissa, and then she'll give it to Maddie, so that they can listen to all of those.
Well, if it's the Don Ferris I'm thinking about, his wife's name was Margaret,
Yes, you're right.
and she just passed away last year down in Robinson.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And their son, John, lives in Robinson, and their
And
other son
and then
also.
Joe, was that, I can't remember how Joe fits in there, if that's his wife. Well, anyway, but Margaret was, right.
Yeah, okay, so same one I'm thinking about
Yeah,
then.
same family, and we bought the house that they all lived in on 8th Street.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Two houses down, of course, the Mackeys live across the street.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, Marshall's a great town to live in, that's for sure. Well, I'm not for sure, but I think maybe I have covered most of the things I had on here.
I might just add, you mentioned music. Of course, that's been a part of your life, but did you have some other hobbies or collections and things? that
I
you did?
love to crochet, and I love to do crewel work, and I don't do it as much now as I used to, and I should get it back out and do it. When people ask me if I'll take a look at or listen to a number they're getting ready to present somewhere, I'm very happy to do that, especially if we got a good accompanist like Damian Macy. I'll tell you, when I got asked to sing at the Catholic Church, it was wonderful when you and Stephanie would play, and it was like big time. The music was beautiful, and the playing was extraordinary, wonderful.
Well, thank you.
It was, and of course you've added so much to any program when you do things, so thank you.
I appreciate that also. You mentioned that you had a couple little animals. And did you always have a dog or a pet?
Always had it. Always. We had dogs. Daddy had bird dogs, and we had a dog that lived in the house usually. And Cocker Spaniels. My dogs today I have a Schnauzer. Millie is a Schnauzer, and she's a little bigger Schnauzer than we've ever had, but Melissa, my daughter now, is running. Like yesterday, she ran 25 miles. That's a lot of running. She's only fallen once. Now, she'll be upset that I even told you this, but only once, and that's pretty good. And she's got her husband running also. I admire Jim. He can cook and he can run. I think I'd sometimes run when she says, well, let's go out and run. So sometimes they just walk, but most of the time they run.
That's a bit much.
That's a bit much for sure. But she enjoys it, and they go all over the country. They've been to a lot of different states, and they have medals that they wear. So, but that's not my thing. One of my lessons I was teaching, I took a fall, and that leg has been the thing that's stopped me. And the other dog I have is a Yorkie Poo.
Oh, they're cute.
And they're cute, but I'm training him to be a better dog, so he is sleeping in the laundry room in a cage until he learns that he is not the alpha, and that Millie is really the alpha, or no one's the alpha but me. So, and last night he took the whole night. He did it the whole night, made it through, and didn't cry. So Melissa thinks that it'll be quicker than I think to get this dog. But it was
They're
a gift.
listening to you then.
Right. And this dog was given to me as a gift. There was a family in town who needed help. And we decided that they were a wonderful family and we would help them. And then one day, the little girl brought this dog in and said, Mrs. Markle, we want you to have this dog. I said, I've had 2 dogs before, and I never could figure out which one was the bad dog. And not either one of them, but meaning that they'd had mischievous notions. But anyway, we thought about it, and Melissa said, this is a way they're thanking us for helping them, so we need to take the dog. And it's been the best dog I've ever had. He sits on my lap. He follows me wherever I go in the house. I'm the shadow.
Part of the family.
He is definitely part of the family, and so is Millie.
Well, let's see, or Martha Ann, you mentioned all of these things that you did, and your mother and dad, but you didn't say where you lived.
Oh, well, you know, when we first came to town, there's a little house behind the jail. And Jim Wall, the basketball coach, had been given another job, and he was moving. And so we bought that house, and my payment on that house was $88 for the month. It was a marvelous house, but it got to be too small, and my grandmother was a couple blocks away, and she helped me take care of Maddie, because I never did stop teaching when I had Maddie. I'll never forget when Eleanor St. John, my boss, called and said, and her name was Eleanor Forsyth St. John, and she said, Martha Ann, I want you to come back now and do the Sparkettes, because I had started the Sparkettes in 1958, and they were doing all right, but she said they aren't as good as when you did it. And I said, okay, I'll be glad to come back. And she said, now you're going to be teaching tennis and badminton and on and on and on and on. And I said, well, that's fine, because I was a physical education major. I did know how to do all those things. And it was really an honor to be asked to come back. And then they have given me 2 50-year parties, as far as one for football and one for basketball, and that I had done it for that long. And it was such a wonderful gift that they gave me, as far as all the girls that could came back. And then they did one number, and I'll never forget one man, that a very prominent man in Terre Haute, came up to me and said, I really liked what they did at that ball game. Do you think you could repeat that number sometime? I said, well, it'll be a little hard, because those girls came from all over the United States to do that number, but that's nice. I will tell them what you said, that he said, well, they really were good, and I really enjoyed what they did. So that was really thoughtful of him. I appreciated that.
When you were growing up as a youngster and still living at home with mom and dad and your brother John, I know where they lived, but you didn't mention that either.
Oh, okay. Johnny went to the University of Illinois, but he decided Dick Buck he didn't want to be his. He was across the line from him, and Johnny said I was being knocked down almost immediately. So he said, I decided I wanted to come back to Indiana State, and also he was in love. And so Suzanne was who he married, and they lived on 8th Street, where he took care of the buses and the garage at school, and his name was, I can't think of his name.
Ron Howe?
That's it, Ron. And they built that house. Now Ron's, I'm sure, improved it a lot, but it was a beautiful house. They lived there, and then they moved to Terre Haute on Barton Avenue, and then he decided he didn't want to scrape windows anymore in the snow, so he moved to Florida, and he spent the rest of his life in Florida. And after the little house for Jim and I, my husband, we lived over on 8th Street, where the Ferrises had lived. And then we moved to Terre Haute on 8th Street, and someone that I dearly love as a family were the Freeds, John and Jean Freed. And Maggie, their daughter, they have 4 children, but Maggie has a place out on the lake, and I think she's right near the Pierces, where they have their house in that area. And she has a house out there, so, and I guess it's quite nice. But then after that house, I'm not for sure. We decided we wanted a smaller house. Well, we live at 1111 Vine Street, and it's not a smaller house. I have a mother-in-law suite, as far as it's just an apartment for me in the house. The house was built for a business. Jack and Jane Manwaring, really the Finkbiners built the house, and then the Manwarings bought the house. And he was an optometrist and a superintendent of schools. Pretty different jobs there for sure. But anyway, then after they sold the house, then Jim and I did a photography studio, and it worked very well for that. And but then when Jim got sick, I said, Jim, we can't do this any longer, because Jim died of renal cell cancer, and it's a very unique type of cancer. It's a kidney cancer, and I wouldn't ever want him to have to go through any more suffering than what he had to. But then he passed away, and 15 years ago now, and it's been a long time since he's been gone.
I think it's been that long.
Right.
You mentioned the man wearings. I got my first glasses from him.
Did you really?
And I remember his wife, because she taught at Martinsville for a while.
She did, and it was an excellent teacher. And then, like I said, Jack was the superintendent of schools. So my dad and Jack, you couldn't get them from talking about school business. I was happy when there was a TV somewhere else, so we could all move around.
Oh, that's interesting. I think you've probably mentioned several people who are so significant in your life, but was there a particular event that happened that you said, boy, that's just, I can't get that out of my mind, or is something that really maybe changed my way of thinking?
Well, of course, when Vaughn stopped the whole chorus and said, we're now going to put dancing girls out there, Martha. I'll never forget that one. I mean, here I was in front of all my peers, and he decides we're going to have the dancing girls around. So I'll never forget that. And then when Ernestine would say to me, Martha Ann, why can't I'll never forget when she'd do this, why can't all the girls in the class look as good as you do? And these were girls that had Terre Haute names, and of course they were taking because their mothers wanted them to take. I was taking because I truly loved what I was doing, and I thought the world of Miss Ernestine. So, but I'll never forget when she would do that. I never did say, Miss Ernestine, would you not do that? Because you never told Miss Ernestine anything like that. I realized that she did it for a purpose, and if she felt that that would help, that's fine.
You had a studio in Marshall for a while.
I did indeed.
And where was that located?
Well, it was on my front porch, and you know, Violet Schaffner, who has just passed away recently, it had one mirror in the front of the studio, and it broke somehow. Somebody threw a baton, and it hit the mirror, and it broke. She saved me a piece of that mirror, and I have it in my home, and I think of her every time I put my jewelry on, because that's where the jewelry sits, is on the mirror she gave me. And that was so thoughtful of her. And her daughter is such a good dancer and is a very fine teacher also. And I did have her daughter in class at school. And that's been something that's been fun. When Marshall kids would come and take my class over at State, and they'd say, oh, right. And it was nice. I'd say, do you remember me? I did this or I did that. And I'd say, yes, or I'd have to sometimes say, you got to help me. You got to help me. Because each Sparkette group had over 50 girls in it. Oh, yeah. So there was a lot of girls to remember names and all. But that was one gift I had. And I noticed that at the age I am now, I can't keep all those names, so I could say this individual and that individual. And I'll never forget, I had a fella in class. And what we did, we went around the class and they'd talk about themselves and where they came from and all this. And I said, well, is there anybody in the class that can name at least maybe 5 names? The fellow stood up and named every person in that class. And I after it was over with, I said, Mitch, I had people called the proctors, and they would come back the next semester and help me teach. And also, a good man dancer is very hard to find. And he was a very fine dancer. Anyway, he said, I will. And I said, anyone who can name every person in the class.
That's real.
That was right. And he came back the next semester and taught. And then when I go over and watch, now he's graduated now. In his family, you could tell they were up near the Chicago area and probably lived in a very beautiful house. And I got to meet their parents, and that was always nice. But the proctors thought it was a real honor to be a proctor in the ballroom classes.
Great. My wife says that your mother and dad both were such a big influence on her, that they both had the philosophy and the comment that you can do whatever you set your mind to do.
Well, of course, I believe that very,
I
very.
know you do.
I really do believe
But I wanted
that.
to pass that on because
Thank
she's
you. I did
referred
not
to that
know.
several times.
And I know that she's named the houses that you own there, right? Our two houses. One is the big bush house, and one's a little bush house. I don't know what she's named them. I can't remember that for sure. But anyway, but that's true. You know, if you make up your mind, you can do something. It might take you a while to do it, and you might have to find people that can help you do it. But you can do and be a success at what you want to be.
I remember her mentioning that long before we even talked about the interview. So I did want to pass that along.
Please thank her, and when I see her, I'll get to thank her. She was in the Chinese restaurant, and I can't remember who she was with, but I don't even know what they were talking about. But she took time to stop and say hello to me, and it was so nice of her to recognize. I appreciated that very much.
Martha Ann, we've all got so many modern conveniences and stuff around in our home and our cars and everything. Is there something that you have to say, I just could not live without that?
Well, I listened to audiobooks. Those were all audios that I had brought back. I have an audiobook going in my car, and I have an audiobook that lays by my chair when television is not worth watching. And then I listen to my audiobooks. So a good radio, and I've had 2 radios go bad on me in my car. And Scott, who just passed away, out at out at Lincoln Trail, he said, now Martha Ann, we can take it out of the car and send it in. I said, yes, and how long do you think, Scott, they'll have to keep it? He says, a long time. I said, just put me a new radio in there. I can't live without one. And he said, okay, but he and the fellow that's there now, I don't know what Matt's last name is, but he is excellent. And you can't ever take somebody's place, but you can certainly gear your life around things that they did and did it right. Well, Matt has done that, but Scott was so special. And when they do special things for me, like I'll never forget, I had a flat tire going to Paris. So I called Lincoln Trail, and Scott said, just sit still, Martha Ann. I'll be out there with another guy, and we'll change your tire. I said, oh, thank you.
Heavens.
Thank goodness. I said, thank you so much. So I went and bought them chocolate chip cookies, all of them, in the whole garage. And they thought that was neat. And all it was is chocolate chip cookies from the IGA. But anyway, I think was that I had thought of.
The thought process.
Right. But they really thought of me because I thought, oh, a flat tire. Because I can't change a tire. They should have taught me how to do that. Because I have friends that can. But not I. Well, you know, I hope with all the people that I've mentioned, and I'm sure probably there is somebody that I have forgotten, that I would have never done it on purpose, because every one of the people that I've mentioned have given me a light to follow and a wonderful life to live. But if they want to tell me that they've forgotten it, I'll have to come back to you and say, you know, Damien, I forgot to tell you about it. I won't do that.
I suppose we always could do an edited version sometime later and put in additions. If you were traveling and were on, let's say in Europe somewhere, and someone said something about Marshall, where's that place? What would you have to tell them about our town and why that might be a good place they want to visit?
Well, you know, that happens. And my gift for my bachelor's degree, my parents sent me on a tour to Europe. And Johnny, my brother, still says, you got to go to Europe and I didn't. I said, yes, but you got a new car when you graduated and I didn't. So I tell him that's what happened. But anyway, I think it happened to I don't remember how this worked, but Terry Stepp had come back for a wrestling get together with all the fellows they used to wrestle with, Tom Porter, and I don't know if Johnny didn't ever wrestle much, but anyway, but it was that this couple was standing there, and Terry and Mary Ann were standing there, and they talked about Marshall, and they said, "Is this Marshall, Illinois you're talking about?" And Terry said, "Well, yeah, that's where we live." And it was one of the fellows that had wrestled and was a very, very prominent wrestler, I guess. And I don't know what he did now. But anyway, I think I would say this is a town that you're never a stranger in. If you smile and speak, they'll speak back to you most of the time. There's not very few people that will ignore you. And it's a town that's not so big that your children get lost in the school system. I mean, if you are not satisfied with your teacher, you call the administration and they work with you. Now, you might not always get your way, but they'll listen to you. Or if a bus driver or something like that needs to be changed, it gets changed. It's not so big that it's not a special place with a beautiful library like we've got, great school systems, people who like it, other people. And, you know, there was one thing I didn't tell you about. It's called the Widows Club. And I had started this group, and Cookie Nash I can't think of now. Listen, I'll have to remember her name. Anyway, Polly Incoff. Yeah. Polly were the two people who helped me to do it, and they would call the girls up who had said that they wanted to go out and eat with us. And it had all kinds of women in it, and we'd go out and eat on a Saturday night, and different people would drive. And sometimes it was a time that a woman wanted to talk about her husband, someone she had lost that she loved dearly. Sometimes it was that she was upset with something. And sometimes it was just they just wanted to talk. But it was called the Widows Club, and it was fun to be in. And then it got so big, and we almost had to break it down into 2 or 3 clubs. So it was popular. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. But I think I would tell them, your best bet is to come and try it. Come over and visit Terry and Mary Ann. Come and visit Johnny and Kay and see what kind of people you'd be around all the time.
Well, thank you so much, Martha Ann. It's been a real delight visiting with you. And both knowing so many people in town over the years, you've certainly highlighted a great number of people who've been an influence on your life and have helped make Marshall what it really is.
You know, I know it's time to quit. Right, Daddy, I know I talk too much. But, you know, Harold Elzoff was someone who absolutely, I'll never forget, we were doing a number down for the band concert, and I said, Harold, I need that old junior high fight song. He said, Martha Ann, we haven't played that in 100 years. And I said, I know you haven't, but that's what we were going to do the routine to. And he found it, and of course I know where you sit. You play a mean clarinet, you do. And that was so nice of him to realize that. Well, thank you. It was an honor to be asked, and when people ask me if I've been here, I said, well, we're having trouble getting together because he's busy, and I was trying to get things done too, and thank you for waiting on me.
Well, I have enjoyed it so much, and again, I want to emphasize both Eleanor and I have always admired your parents so much, and I know they did so many things for Marshall. And I'm glad you highlighted some of those, because this is for not necessarily for someone to look at or listen to next week, but in the future. So they'll know what some of the things that you and your family have been involved in.
Daddy and Mother were very special, and I'm so happy people knew that.
And thanks again for your time. I just enjoyed the visit so much, and wish you well.
Thank you very much, and the same to you.